Thanks very much, Stephen, and great presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of net zero houses, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit global, but mostly Canadian. So we'll jump right in here. So I think with the slide that Stephen showed, with the greenhouse gas going way up, I think everybody now understands that climate change is real, and it is having an effect on our community, and it's having an effect on our planet. And if I could just have a personal moment here for a second. When the storm came through on the 24th of May weekend, the first time in my life, we lost one car. My truck got smashed up when the tree fell on it from my neighbor's house, and our house lost one piece of siding and two pieces of flashing. Then the storm came through Tweed, and that's an area where I grew up, so a lot of my friends were affected by that storm. When Hurricane Fiona came through, my daughter is studying in Halifax, and she got all set up. I called her and said, you know, have you got your emergency kit? Yeah, Dad, got water, got canned food. We're all stocked up on wine. And I'm thinking, wait a second, the wine's not on the list, eh? It's not. And she said, yeah, but I'm not going to have the same thing happen to me that happened to you and Mom. I took my car and I put it at my neighbor's house, my friend's house, because they don't have any trees. So the tree was 2 houses down. It fell across the sidewalk and prevented her from getting her car out for about a week or 10 days until someone came and cut up the tree. And then Hurricane Ian came, and it went through Fort Myers, Florida. My son and his wife and my 2 grandkids my son and his wife have accepted jobs in United States. They're moving in 2 weeks to Fort Myers. And their house was supposed to close. They were supposed to buy their house on the 30th of September. That was the day Ian hit. Okay? So this climate change thing is affecting me personally. I'm wondering, what did I do to Mother Nature that she just wants to, you know, kind of start poking me here? But what are we doing in the big world? There was the Paris Accord a few years ago where 196 countries got together, agreed that climate change was a thing, and thought, okay, well, we're going to deal with it. They all signed an agreement to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. The Pan-Canadian Framework, that's Canada's specific plan for how we are going to bring down our greenhouse gas emissions here. So this is kind of where greenhouse gases are coming from. Notice that building operations, about 28%. This is a global look. So 28%. The material that goes into the buildings, about 11%. So that's 39% of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from buildings. Notice also another big one is transportation and industry and other. Well, so there is a specific plan for each one of these sectors. So in Canada, we build approximately 200 to 250,000 new buildings a year, and we have 14 million buildings that already exist in the country, okay? We can't get to our greenhouse gas emission targets without building all new houses better and without renovating 7 million of our existing housing stock. So this is a big undertaking that we've got that we're moving forward on. So what's the deal with the carbon? So when a carbon-based fuel is burned to provide energy to operate the building, it releases the carbon into the atmosphere. So this is known as operational carbon. When we use carbon, when we burn carbon-based fuels to create a material that we use to build the houses, like concrete and steel and insulation and glass and all of that, and we transport it and we use that to build the house, that's called embodied carbon. So what I'm going to deal with today, I'm going to talk about operational carbon. Embodied carbon, we'll talk for another 3 or 4 hours on that. So in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from operational, the energy that we use to operate our houses, the best way is to make our houses more energy efficient. So that means net zero or net zero ready or R2000 or passive house or any of those. So a net zero ready home, a net zero home is a house that produces as much energy as it consumes over the course of a year. A net zero ready house is the same. It's a net zero house, but without the energy generation component installed yet. So it's called net zero ready because it's ready to get the solar collectors put on the roof, and then it would become net zero. So the way we're addressing new houses is through the National Building Code. So the National Building Code is targeting that all new houses built in Canada by 2030 or 2032, in that range, will be net zero ready at the minimum. Okay, they could be better than that, but they will need to be at least net zero ready. And as I said, we can drive operational carbon to zero by building all of our houses to net zero. So what does that mean, driving our operational carbon to zero? It means that we're going to eliminate fossil fuels in new homes by 2030 or 2032. So what fuels? That's oil, natural gas, propane, and electricity if it's produced from a fuel-fired generating station. So that means if the generating station produces electricity by burning coal, oil, or natural gas, that's going to be out. They're going to have to be converted to basically to nuclear, or we're going to have more renewable sources of energy. And in Canada, the building code is administered provincially, so the provinces can advance the building code, or they can hold back a little bit. But in this case, they're all working towards 2030. But some cities have already jumped ahead. So Victoria announced in August that by 2025, you won't be able to use natural gas to heat a house in Victoria, BC. Okay, so this is already moving forward. As I mentioned, our National Building Code is going to mandate this. It's going to mandate that in 2030 to 2032, all new houses are going to have to be net zero ready. The way they're doing it is by introducing tiers to the code. So the 2020 code is tier 1, so that's that energy level. Then tier 2 is a 10% better in terms of energy efficiency, all the way up to tier 5, which is a 70% better than the houses that are being built under today's code. Tier 5 was what will be in place in 2030. Okay? Now, the Canadian Home Builders Association set up in 2017 something called the Net Zero Home Labeling Program. So what that program is to say, here's a set of technical specs for how to get to net zero, or how to get to net zero ready. And then they put that out there to the building industry across Canada and said, okay guys, knock yourselves out. Let's see you build some net zero houses. So since the program started in 2017, as of October, just this month, there's now just over 1,000 houses that have been built and labeled voluntarily by builders across the country to the net zero standard. Okay? That's super important, because what that does is it gives us a roadmap as builders. It gives us a roadmap as to how we're going to get to net zero and how we're going to be able to achieve this. Now remember that in those 5 years, we built roughly 1 million new houses in Canada, of which 1,000 of those got labeled. Okay? That's only 0.1%. But the feedback from that is a learning experience for builders all across the country. So how are we getting there? We looked at the 1,000 houses that have been built and labeled and said, how do we get there? Well, first thing, every builder worked with an energy advisor. And surprise, surprise, we've got an energy advisor that's going to talk to us here today. It's Stefan Magneron, okay? And he is full of energy. The insulation under the basement floor, full height insulation on the walls, extra insulation on the above grade walls, extra insulation in the ceiling, high performance windows, and energy efficient mechanical systems. So insulation all the way around the house. So think about it. What do you do when you get cold? You put on a sweater. Basically, we're putting a sweater on the houses, and we're putting a pretty thick sweater on these houses. The other thing that they're doing is they're driving air change in the houses down to 1 or less than 1. Less than 1 down to 0.5. The requirement for net zero is 1.5 air changes or less. And what an air change is that we've got, they use a big fan, they depressurize the house and measure how much air leaks in, and then from that they calculate how many air changes the house would undergo at 50 pascals of depressurization, and you get a number. So an old farmhouse is maybe 10 to 15 air changes. A brand new house built to the building code is assumed to be 3, okay? Net zero is going to be 1 or down. A lot of the builders are trying to get down to less than 0.5, 0.5. So that makes the house more comfortable, more energy efficient, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we get the house to that level of air tightness, we're going to put in a heat recovery ventilator or an energy recovery ventilator so that the inhabitants have got great indoor air quality and the house is more comfortable to live in. And then the last thing is to put, and this shouldn't be the last thing, but is photovoltaic panels on the roof to generate the energy. And surprise, surprise, but we've got a photovoltaic guy here too with Chris Meacham. He's going to talk to us. So when we look at the crew that puts together the house, we're still using framers, we're still using roofers, we're using insulators. The 3 guys that are a little bit different are the energy advisor, the photovoltaic guy, and the air tightness guy. I'm the air tightness guy. And you notice I kind of subtly I highlighted that so I would, kind of stand out from those other 2 guys. And but they're going to get their 15 minutes of fame here in a minute. Anyway, so air tightness, the reason why that's important is because no matter what size the house is, and this is 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, and as we tighten the house from 6 down to 1, you'll see that none of those lines cross. So every little bit of air tightness that we're able to achieve in a house is beneficial. It brings down the energy requirement in the house. So a lot of the builders are saying that's someplace where we can pick that up pretty quickly. When we put it all together, what does it look like? Well, it looks pretty similar to Watercolour Westport. In fact, it looks just like Watercolour Westport. And this, folks, is special. This community is special. This is probably, I don't know of any others, but this is the first community in Canada where the builder has said no fossil fuels on the site. So there's no fossil fuels there. It's an all-electric subdivision. So that's pretty gutsy. I don't know any other builders across the country that have said no fossil fuels on the site. You bet. That deserves an applause. Absolutely. Way to go. All of the houses in there are net zero or net zero ready. And to go after that transportation energy, this is a walkable community to boot. So there's going to be some effect. I don't know how it's going to get measured, but there is going to be some effect on that transportation side. So this is my second to last slide. The Watercolour Westport is 10 years ahead of its time. 10 years. So this is a world-class housing development. There's going to be people who are going to be coming here to see this development so they can figure out how to do it in their own communities. And we're using today's technology to produce tomorrow's houses. Nothing in these houses is experimental. We've been working on this since the 1960s to be able to get to this point, to be able to build houses that can be off-grid, completely energy sustainable, and it's available now. We're showing other builders what we can do. Fossil fuels have been eliminated. Walking community. Watercolor is something Westport can be proud of. Really, this is world class. I'm sure that other rural municipalities are going to be contacting people here to say, what are you guys doing? How are you doing this? How are you getting this thing done this way? How could we do it in our communities? So I just want to say, a big congratulations to Stephen Ralston and Kevin Rankin and all you guys from Land Ark Homes, the whole team's here. So put your hand up there and give a wave, guys. I know you're back there. Anyway, congratulations, everybody. This has been, it's phenomenal. And that's my contact information if you want to get a hold of me at some point. But otherwise, that's my presentation for today, folks. Thanks for coming out.